a young man is accidentally transported to a fantastical land, where he decides to use the favors of a goddess to start a new life as an alchemist. The protagonist is blinded by a strange light, unable to understand what is happening. When he regains consciousness, he sees a beautiful woman welcoming him to Midgard, the place where he has been summoned through otherworldly magic. She introduces herself as the goddess Nolan and apologizes to him, explaining that his summoning was a mistake. The protagonist becomes even more confused, so the goddess clarifies. The summoning process is like a claw machine game, where a target is selected for summoning. Unfortunately, he was affected, despite not being the intended target. She explains that interworld summoning magic is extremely dangerous and can even destroy an entire world, which is why it is forbidden. However, a problematic nation ignored those rules and performed the summoning. Nolan tried to intervene as quickly as possible, but was unable to stop it, which is why he is now there. The protagonist asks if the others who were summoned are also in this place. Nolan responds that those individuals were summoned directly to the Holy Empire of Cydonia. The protagonist finally understands that this is all a grave mistake and asks the goddess to send him back to his world. However, she regretfully explains that she cannot, as she was so angered by the forbidden summoning that she patched the magic, making it unusable forever. She tries to explain that the patch is a distortion of space and time, but the protagonist asks her to get to the point. Nolan sums it up. I can't send you back to your world, and in fact, you no longer even have a body to return to. The protagonist then realizes he has no body and is only a small ball of energy. The goddess informs him that in addition to being transported, his body was destroyed due to an error. Unsure of what will become of him, the goddess advises him to resign himself and start a new life in Midgard. The protagonist asks if he can also go to Cydonia with the rest of the summoned. Nolan considers it an option, but warns that it's a problematic place where he would be mistreated for being a mistake. Feeling guilty about what happened, the goddess promises her support to help him start over. She explains that, much like in video games, there are monsters and adventures here. However, instead of being excited, the protagonist is concerned. Nolan assures him he will be fine since he has a goddess's support and asks him to think about his stats. An information window appears revealing his details. His name is Takum, and he will be 17 years old. The protagonist finds this alarming, as he is actually 40 and a businessman. Nolan tells him not to sweat the details and points out that there are no businessmen in Midgard. He must now choose between being a combatant, such as a knight, mage, or hunter, or a creator, such as a blacksmith, herbalist, or alchemist. The protagonist dislikes conflict and chooses to be a creator. Nolan creates a crystal with her power, recommends that he learn to use his skills well, and gives him practical magic and healing spells for self-defense. The crystal flies into the protagonist's body, and Nolan bids him farewell, wishing him a good journey to Asugard. Takumi appears in a field, looks at his reflection in the water, and discovers he is now a very handsome young man. He checks his bag, finding food and some money. He also checks his stats, which are all at level 1, though he has elemental magic. Notably, it is marked that the goddess Nolan owes him a favor, which worries him as he hides it, fearing someone might find out. He also finds an item box. Testing his magic, he starts with a small water ball and then practices shooting stones. He becomes excited about living in a fantasy world. Exploring the forest in search of a city, he finds a wooden stick. Analyzing it, he discovers it's treant wood, used for wands and magical items. Using his smithing magic, he transforms it into a spear. He uses his evaluation skill to search for more items and finds herbs for potions and poisons, gathering so much that his bag overflows. He remembers he has an item box, an infinite storage space connected to a temporal void. At that moment, he hears a girl screaming for help. She takes shelter behind him, pursued by a giant rabbit with a horn. Takumi, terrified, grabs his spear to defend himself. When the rabbit attacks, he manages to land a strike, unlocking the spear mastery skill. Takumi is shocked by his first victory and thanks the goddess for her favors, though she knows it was just luck. A new stat, Warrior, unlocks, confusing Takumi, who wanted nothing to do with violent skills. The girl thanks him for saving her. Takumi asks where she's from, and she replies that she comes from Baude village and only ventured into the forest for medicinal herbs. He asks if he can accompany her, and she happily agrees, suggesting they take the rabbit with them, as it could make a feast. He agrees and stores the rabbit in his item box. The girl is amazed by what he did, and Takumi remembers he should keep the item box a secret. However, he brushes it off, and they set off. The girl introduces herself as Molly. Meanwhile, in the Holy Empire of Sidonia, the group of summoned individuals wonder where they are. A hooded woman welcomes them and explains that they are no longer in their world and have been summoned to save this one with their power. The woman introduces herself as Elizabeth, the first imperial princess of Sidonia. The boys are struck by her beauty, but Akane, one of the summoned girls, feels suspicious. Suddenly, Akane's revelation ability activates, a skill granted to her by Nolan, who also tells her that her intuition will guide her to the right answer. Using this, Akane realizes that Elizabeth cannot be trusted. Meanwhile, Takumi brings the little girl back to her parents, who thank him profusely. Takumi tells them he's just a young explorer gathering ingredients, but plans to stay in the village for a while. Molly's parents think that's a good idea since the area is rich in ingredients and even minerals valuable for crafting. The only downside is that there are no inns in the village. They suggest a simple solution: building his own house. They take him to a small plot of land. Takumi uses earth magic to flatten the ground, but the effort drains him and leaves him exhausted. The villagers are amazed by Takumi's magic and offer to finish the work for him. The next day, the small house is complete, simple yet cozy and well organized. Takumi checks his stats, which have significantly increased thanks to all the work. However, he's annoyed that his job still shows him as both a warrior and a mage. He changes the warrior class to alchemist, the path he truly wishes to pursue. He mines some minerals in the village, collecting iron, silver, and copper, as well as some magical iron. Using his alchemy skills, he transforms the iron fragments into an ingot. Excited, Takumi overworks himself and collapses. Molly brings him dinner one evening and finds him unconscious on the floor. Molly's mother scolds him, urging him to be more cautious. After they give him a healing potion, Takumi resumes his alchemy practice, though he takes breaks this time. Molly and her mother check on him periodically. He gathers many metals and crafts various kitchen utensils, which boosts his alchemist level. Takumi also starts working with Bobon, the village blacksmith, which increases his blacksmith stats. One day, Takumi visits Molly's father to request some potions, as he wants to study them and synthesize his own. Molly's father agrees on the condition that Takumi sells him some potions afterward. Back at his house, Takumi mixes herbs, reminiscing about his school days. When he finishes, he compares his potion to Molly's father's potions and notices the colors are different. He wonders what he did differently and hypothesizes that the difference lies in the use of magical water. Determined to discover new recipes, he ventures into the forest to experiment with different poisonous herbs. After purifying himself with a light spell, Takumi unlocks the skills Poison Resistance and Paralysis Resistance. He pushes himself to improve his resistance and light magic stats, but the effort leaves him exhausted and in pain. Suddenly, a giant armored boar appears from the trees, looking furious and ready to attack. Takumi tries throwing a knife, but it bounces harmlessly off the boar's skin. He attempts to block the attack with his spear, but it breaks without harming the boar. Barely dodging the attack, Takumi uses air and stone magic to strike the boar, but they are ineffective. Panicking, Takumi notices an unusual poisonous spider in the grass. He's now surrounded by two dangerous creatures and contemplates escaping, but the spider appears injured. The boar charges and Takumi braces for the end, but the spider leaps onto the boar's face, distracting it. Despite the spider's efforts, it is gravely injured and the boar remains unscathed. In despair, Takumi begins to cry, thinking it's the end for him. At that moment, he unlocks a skill called Intuition, and an idea suddenly comes to mind. As the boar charges, Takumi uses his creation magic at close range, finally bringing the beast down. Takumi unlocks skills for magical and martial combat. His practice with creation magic has saved him. He tends to the critically injured spider, healing it as thanks for saving him. He bids the spider farewell and prepares to return to the village. However, he learns the taming skill and is given the option to tame the poisonous spider. Reluctant at first to have a spider as a companion, Takumi softens when the spider looks endearing and asks if it wants to join him. When the spider agrees, he names it Maple after the maple leaf-shaped mark on its back. The spider glows, grows larger, and heals completely, evolving into a venom assassin spider. Overjoyed, Maple pledges her eternal loyalty to Takumi. Back in the village, Takumi presents the boar he defeated to the astonished villagers. While its massive size leaves them speechless, they are even more stunned by the spider perched on his shoulder. Takumi reassures them, explaining that he has tamed Maple, though the villagers are baffled since such spiders are believed untamable. Putting their doubts aside, the villagers cook the boar for a grand feast. They also give Takumi some parts of the boar to craft leather armor and extra materials to sell in the city. In the sky, Nolan watches Takumi, proud of his progress. Another goddess approaches Nolan, questioning her actions, giving Takumi a special body, multiple blessings, and even sending him to this world a year before Sidonia's summoning spell activated. Nolan brushes off the questions, claiming she had no particular reason. Takumi wakes up one morning to find himself wrapped in a spider web. He immediately suspects Maple, who tries to act innocent and pretend she doesn't know what happened. Takumi scolds her, explaining that she can't do that. Maple eventually admits her mistake and apologizes, but explains she did it because Takumi has been so busy with his potions and alchemy lately that he hasn't had time to play with her. Takumi agrees and decides not to work that day, choosing instead to spend the day playing with Maple. This makes the spider very happy, and she starts jumping on Takumi. At that moment, Molly's mother Martha sees the scene and panics, thinking that Maple is trying to eat him. Takumi explains the situation to calm her down. As Martha looks around, she notices the fine quality of the spider web and grows interested. She uses the web to make clothes that impress all her friends. Spider webs are considered a luxury material, primarily used by nobles. Martha asks Maple to produce more web. Takumi tries to explain that only he can communicate with Maple, but it seems Maple understands Martha well enough as she begins providing what she requests. Takumi reminds Maple that they were supposed to play that day, but the spider replies that she's too busy with work now. Takumi decides to return to his tasks, reflecting that it's been a month since he arrived. He plans to visit a city soon to study alchemy. He visits the blacksmith and receives a gift, a boar hide armor. Bobon, the blacksmith, points out that it needs adjustments to be efficient in combat. Takumi insists the adjustments are unnecessary since he focuses only on crafting. Bobon counters that no crafter travels the forest alone. Molly's father enters and asks how the armor turned out, knowing they need to hurry since Takumi might leave for the city soon. Takumi, feeling a bit sad, agrees, but his friends understand his reasons and support him. They tell him a merchant from the city of Bolton will arrive in a few days and they'll arrange for him to travel with the merchant. Later, Takumi encounters Martha, carrying a bucket of rabbit meal they caught the other day. She explains that they're the tastiest parts but can harbor parasites and diseases if untreated, so they must be discarded. Takumi offers to purify them using his magic. Instantly, the meals change color and become safe to eat. Martha is surprised to see he can now use light magic. She thanks him but advises him not to use such magic openly. Few people can use light magic, and those who can often become very wealthy. While it might not matter in this village, it's better to keep a low profile. In the following days, Takumi uses earth magic to reinforce the village walls and his knowledge to install water wells. Before leaving, he wants to express his gratitude by doing all he can for the village. The day finally arrives. The merchant from Bolton, Mr. Popek, has arrived. Molly's father, Binda, prepares his order. Takumi joins them. Binda introduces Takumi, and they get ready for the journey. Takumi tells Binda he left about 100 potions at his house and asks him to give them to those in need. The potion immediately catches Popek's attention. Takumi explains that it's just a basic potion he crafted. Popek examines it closely and notices something special about it. Martha arrives with other villagers to bid Takumi farewell. She gives him a parting gift, a beautiful custom-made coat. It was made using Maple's thread, and the children helped with the design and patterns. Takumi thanks everyone for everything they've done for him. He begins his journey, with the villagers bidding him a heartfelt farewell. This village was the first place in Nilfgaard he lived in, and from now on, he will consider it his home. Popek notices how beloved Takumi is in the village. One of his companions even tears up, touched by how special everything was. The three men accompanying them introduce themselves to Takumi: Heath, Riel, and Bogar. They are members of Lionfang, a C-rank adventurer group tasked with escorting Popek. While they believe the area is safe, they prefer to be cautious. Riel notices Takumi carrying a large sack with great care and asks what's inside. Takumi replies, "It's a killer spider." The adventurers are shocked to hear he managed to tame a spider. Riel tries to look inside, but the sack jumps and hits him hard in the face. Takumi scolds Maple for doing that, but Heath insists the fault lies with Riel for approaching so suddenly. He even blames him if Maple now fears people, but they discover Maple sleeping soundly next to Bogar. Popek calls Takumi and asks if he has more potions like the one he showed Banga, as he'd like to buy some. Takumi agrees to sell them. Suddenly, the cart stops abruptly. The adventurers, excited, prepare for a fight. The group of goblins emerges from the forest and heads toward the cart. Popek panics comically. The goblins attack, but the adventurers defeat them with ease. Once the goblins are dealt with, they collect the magic stones left behind. Maple warms up to Bogar, dislikes Riel, and is indifferent to Heath. After this minor incident, the journey continues peacefully. 3 days later, they finally arrive in Bolton, the first city of Mildgard that Takumi visits. Everything amazes Takumi about the city. The first thing he does is accompany Lion Fang to deliver their report to the Adventurers Guild. If he wants to remain in the city, he also needs to register both Maple and himself as adventurers. Initially, Takumi would have preferred to register with the Alchemists Guild, but unfortunately, Bolton doesn't have one. He has to settle for the Adventurers Guild so he can use the guild card as a personal ID. The lowest rank card doesn't expire as long as he completes at least one request per month. After finishing his registration, he heads to the Popek company, where Takumi shows Popek the types of potions he has for sale. Excited by the deal, Popek offers him 10 silver coins for each basic healing and stamina potion, and 50 silver coins for each mana potion. Takumi does the math and realizes he's just made a small fortune. Takumi thinks he might be overpaid, but Popek explains that, as an unknown crafter, the payment is below average. Something about Popek's generosity feels suspicious to Takumi. Still, Popek doesn't seem like someone who deceives people. Interrupting Takumi's thoughts, Popek advises him to establish himself in a workshop to further his crafting career. Takumi explains he's just arrived in the city and can't afford a house with or without a workshop. Popek suggests renting one and even offers to show him some properties. He rings a bell and his assistant, Thomas, appears. Popek asks Thomas to show Takumi a house, and Takumi is surprised to find it's practically a mansion. Thomas tells him the rent is 1 gold and 50 silver coins per month. It seems like a great price to Takumi, but he suspects it might be haunted. Thomas assures him the house has a good reputation. Takumi considers he can pay the rent by selling potions. When Maple asks where they are, Takumi replies that it's their new home and agrees to the deal. Thomas begins the paperwork, and they plan to move in the next day. Takumi thanks him, but notices something bothering his nose. Since arriving in the city, he sensed something odd in the air. Thomas explains that it's due to the sewage system beneath the city. Nobles use artifacts to reduce the stench, but the city can't afford them. Priests are hired to purify the sewers occasionally, but it doesn't help much. The following day, Takumi and Maple move into their new home. Wasting no time, Takumi begins a new project. He mixes the clay he bought from Popek and molds it using magic. Once dry, he heats it with a temperature control spell, then uses a space-time spell to speed up the firing process, strengthening it and setting its final shape. When finished, Takumi is exhausted from the magical effort, but the result is worth it. He's created a bathroom. Takumi knows it's the one thing he truly missed in this world. Suddenly, he hears Popek shouting in the house. Takumi rushes to see what's wrong and finds him wrapped in a spiderweb. Takumi asks Maple what she did, and she replies that she was simply welcoming him. Takumi explains that only the village children enjoyed that kind of welcome. However, Popek finds the web so comfortable he decides to take a nap. Takumi untangles him and apologizes. Popek doesn't mind and asks to use the bathroom. Takumi shows him the way, but is soon alarmed when Popek calls him again. Popek is shocked and asks what kind of bathroom it is. Takumi explains it's a toilet that purifies waste, separating clean water from organic matter. Popek is astonished and asks if Takumi can use light magic. Takumi remembers Martha's warning and begs Popek to keep it a secret. Popek agrees but asks Takumi to make 100 more of these toilets. Feeling obligated, Takumi agrees, provided he can get the necessary materials. Popek thanks him and suggests hiring workers. Takumi had already considered hiring an assistant, but Popek recommends using servants. He explains that a servant would manage the household, ensure security, and be bound by contract magic to keep secrets. Takumi feels it's too much, so Popek explains that using light magic marks someone as divinely chosen, or so it's believed. This is why the Divine Light Church takes in light magic users, profiting from their healing abilities. Popek warns that the church won't take kindly to toilets using purifying magic. Takumi asks if it's safe to produce them. Popek assures him he has a plan to gain support for the project, but insists they keep the creator's identity secret. Using servants is the best way to ensure that. Takumi refuses, saying that exploiting people is wrong. He'd rather do it alone. At that moment, he receives a message from the guild reminding him to complete his monthly requests. With the guild tasks and toilet production, Takumi realizes he can't handle everything on his own. Popek takes him to the Mulan Company, the most reliable place to find servants. There, Takumi meets a blonde-haired girl who promptly tells him to get lost. Hey, if you made it to this part of the video, don't forget to write the word Exquisito in the comment section. Thank you so much and see you in the next video.